One thing I really appreciate you, Pat, is how much you not only test what you're doing publicly, but you really go into the nuts and bolts of it. And I feel like when I think about counselors, therapists, coaches, people that listen to the show, it's really people that have had a very traditional career. And similar to how,
Right.
you were kind of in the engineering world and then you spun off of that, you're trained to write a paper, you turn it in, you get a grade, or you do your thesis or your dissertation. And that's just not how the business world works. So I would love to hear, how did you move away from that mindset? Because I think when you're highly educated and you're in that world, it's hard to undo that. And then secondly, maybe some examples of how you're testing and experimenting now, and then we'll just see where it goes from there.
Okay, cool. Yeah, testing is very important because, like you said, when we go to school, or for me, I grew up in a traditional household where, it was all about getting good grades. And if you didn't get good grades, then you had to do better. And so you just work so hard to try and be perfect. And especially with, I imagine, a number of people who have clients, and there's a lot of, medical and that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, okay, those things you have to get it right? Because you're offering specific kinds of advice, and those things are really important. But when it comes to the actual business part, the growing of your business, if you were to treat the growth of your business in the same way, you're never going to get anywhere, because there is no perfect launch. There's really no such thing. The growth in business happens from you getting quicker to the points of failure. And so I often say, fail faster. And there's many different examples of that. But if you want to go back to the analogy that you mentioned, which I love, which is like, okay, let's write a dissertation. It has to be perfect. You turn it in, and it is what it is. And then it's done and you move on. The business approach, or the smart business approach, is to, okay, let's just figure out, okay, first of all, what is this about? And let's see if we can just nail the overall overarching theme of this first. Okay, let's test that. Let's talk about it with people. Let's talk about it with others and see how they respond to it. If we don't get the response we want, then it's not even worth writing the whole thing yet. Let's just first see if we can nail the purpose of this first. Okay, now that we've nailed that, we got a green light. Let's move on to the next step. Let's write that first paragraph. And that just kind of sums up everything and hooks people into the whatever it is. And let's test that now. Let's test that and see how people respond. Because if people don't respond to that, then the rest of the thing probably doesn't even matter, right? So let's test that, experiment, try things out, and fail so we can know what to do next. And that's been my best strategy to move forward, is just, okay, let's remove the guesswork as much as possible by chopping this big thing up into something much, much smaller, and then actually going to our target audience, or people who are knowledgeable about this stuff, and actually seeing how it goes first. Essentially, instead of like launching the whole experiment, I'm going to test it first in a little tiny petri dish, because if it fails, well, good thing it's contained in that petri dish. If it works, great. Let's just rinse and repeat and level it up from there. And I've done this in many different ways, from testing book ideas to course ideas to just overall businesses in general. For example, when I wrote my book, Superfans, initially that was just a video about that idea. And because that video actually performed very well, it moved on from a video to then go on stage, where I could then talk about more ideas and start to unpack this book even more. But before putting them into the book, I actually had a chance to talk to people about them and test different things. And there were so many things that I did not include in the book, because after speaking with people or speaking on stage and reading the audience, hey, it didn't hit home as much as some of the other things that ended up sticking in. And I do the same thing with my courses too. For example, I teach podcasting. I have a course on how to podcast. Well, I didn't just create the course at first. I actually just helped a couple people first to see if do I even like teaching other people how to podcast? I don't know. So let's figure it out. Let's remove the guesswork. And then, of course, what happened was I helped a couple people out more actively. It wasn't a course or anything close to passive at first. But after helping people out, not only was I like, oh, like this actually helps people, but it unlocked the confidence in me that, okay, like I can do this and I can scale it and I can grow it into something much bigger. And now we've sold over $2.5 million worth of that single course to help people pass a podcast, or not pass an exam, to help people start a podcast. And again, the tests really told us the way. It's the failures give us the direction.
I love that you mentioned to see if I even like it, because I feel like there's so many ways to make money, and a lot of therapists and counselors maybe don't feel that way, but there really are. But to really figure out, like, do I even enjoy this? And for me personally, that even changes year to year. I was doing a lot of
Mhm.
mastermind groups a few years ago, and then that commitment of every single month running a mastermind group, I just passed that off to other consultants, and then for them, they wanted to level up. And that idea of doing what you enjoy doing is just as important as the making of the money. I love that you make that point. So when you're testing out things, as you said, in a petri dish, like, what are some kind of practical examples of that? Because I think if you're testing a book or a course, like, what does that look like? Is that an email to your list? Is that on social media? Is that thrown out on the podcast? Is it all of the above? Like, what's that actually practically look like?
Yeah, so let's pretend we're trying to create a new course about something, and ultimately we think in our heads, okay, it would be really neat to add another asset to our business, an online course that could teach people versus having them come into the practice, which costs much more. It allows us to serve those who perhaps can't afford us, or who just we don't have the time to serve everybody. So an online course, great. Okay, this makes sense, but let's test it first. So what might this look like? It might simply be a post on social media that says, hey, if you need help with X, Y, and Z, let me know below and let me know what your biggest struggles are about that. If you have nobody reply, well, then why would you even move forward to create a course yet? We haven't actually understood that people actually want this, or know that they want it yet. Another test might be, and again, that's just like the first test. Maybe you do get a lot of people saying, yeah, I want more information. It doesn't quite mean yet that you're ready to create a course, but let's move on to the next step. Okay, you all said you wanted help on this. Well, I am putting together a free workshop, and it's going to be a 1-hour training. It's going to be a webinar. You sign up here, you register with your name and email, and we're going to come together on this date, and I'm just going to teach you for 45 minutes to an hour about this topic, because y'all said that you wanted more information about it. Let's see if that's true. Okay, let's have a registration page. Let's send that out. Again, if you get nobody to come in, well, good thing you didn't create the course yet. Now people said they wanted it, but they didn't actually do anything about it. So that's the red light where we go, okay, well, what about that was wrong? And then you said you wanted this, and that's the point at which we can go back and start to decipher what the problem or the issue was, or the misunderstanding. But if, again, you get a green light, great. Okay. Now, next step might be to get these people on this webinar, and you start chatting with them, talking with them, and you say, hey, a lot of you are here and you loved it. If you want to work with me one-on-one, or perhaps get more information about this, send a reply to the email that I'm about to send to you with your phone number, and I'd love to call you and just chat with you about it to see if it's a good fit. And then you can just go, okay, I'm going to try to get 5 people to pay for this thing, to work with them for a month, one-on-one, and I'm going to just turn that into a 4-week online course program eventually, but I'm going to test it with these 5 people first to see if A, I like it, or B, they even like it. And the cool thing about testing it in that way first before launching publicly is, A, those people feel like they get a little bit of additional access to you. B, a lot of people like being the first to receive that information. And C, you get to test whether or not you like it, and if they like it, and if they do and they get results, well, now you have testimonials, so that when you launch this thing big, you're not like, hey, I've never launched this thing before or tested this with anybody. You have real people who've gotten real results with a real before and after story that you can now share with people who might otherwise not purchase because they don't want to be the first. So this is how we can take these iterative approaches to things. And again, if you get a sense of, well, people don't want this, that's a good thing. You found that out now, versus what most people do is they go, oh, I think they might want an online course. My friend did an online course and it worked for them, so I think it's going to work for me too. So that you build the whole thing, and then you start to try to sell it, and then you go, why isn't anybody buying? It's crickets. And now not only is nobody buying, but you have nobody that you can go back to who had said they were interested but then didn't purchase, that would give you a lot of information to figure out what is wrong, right? And I think it was Seth Godin who said, you want to build you don't want to find customers for your products. You don't want to find customers for your products. You want to find products for your customers. So it starts with who it is that you're serving and figuring out what it is that they need first, versus most of the case people go the opposite direction.